Hi, friends. It's Nikki. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you for joining my channel. Make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button. Today, we're going to be looking at layered stencils. Now, this stencil that I'm going to be using is called Happy Hauntings, and it's from Honeybee Stamps. It does have a die set with it. You can do the same thing by doing a little fussy cutting, but we're going to look at 3 different ways to use a layered stencil to give you ideas of how to get out your supplies and use them in different ways you may not have thought about. Now, my first tip is you don't have to use every layer of a layered stencil. So this is the first layer that is a web. This could be used all by itself, or you could add it to the stenciling that I'm doing. I'm going to do this in a light color called Cummerbund from Catherine Pooler. Now, if you're using this, you want to make sure that you've got kind of a lighter color because you're going to be able to see this pattern through your other stenciling. So I'm keeping mine with a pretty light blue with this cummerbund, and I'm going to go darker at the edges and then lighter towards the middle. I did start with a little bit bigger size because these stencils are 6x6. I'm going to go ahead and make a 6x6. I will probably cut this down so that I get the parts that I want the most on the pattern. But I like to go ahead and start. If I'm going to be stenciling, I may as well color some extra, and you may be able to get some extra use out of parts of your card. Came in with the next darker color, which is called Fiesta Blue, and just kind of added it along the edges and colored this in a little bit more. When I started putting it on, I realized that I really liked how beautiful it was, and so I kind of added it to most of it just very lightly in the middle. And look at this reveal. You could just leave the card like this and it would look so cute. So now we're going to go and we're starting with the first parts of our pumpkins. I'm going to go over the colors and just a couple of tips on the ink blending, but I'm mainly going to speed this up so that you can kind of see what colors we put down and all the extras that we do. So you can still see a little bit of that pattern through my pumpkin, but as I blend more, I really blend out that other ink underneath it. And it just kind of looks like barely a pattern there. You really can still see my pumpkins really nicely. Now, to make these really stand out, I'm taking a little brush from Waffle Flower and I'm painting in the edges with a darker color. This is going to give our pumpkins that amazing, just like the light is hitting the middle of the pumpkin, and it just really makes your project stand out. See how good these look? And even though there is a pattern behind them, it's still really, the pumpkins show up just fine with barely that pattern seen through. This next layer has more pumpkins, but you see that I'm adding pieces of blue tape. It also has the bottoms of some of the candy corns, and I want those to be yellow. So I did use a little bit of masking to make sure I could get those the right color. Next, I'm going to use a small brush to fill in those candy corn pieces. I also had a little bit of candy wrappers on this too, and you could just do those yellow and go over these other pieces, but I wanted my candy wrappers to be a different color, so I'm going to add some green to those as well. So next I'll add a little bit of green to the candy wrappers. Make sure that you have some small brushes. It makes this much easier and you don't need to do any masking if that's the case. If you've got a little small round tip, you can get your brush right in those little areas and get this taken care of without having to use any tape or Post-it notes. So where it comes the problem is here with the ghost. If you want your ghost to be translucent, then use a light gray. That works perfectly fine. I wanted mine to be opaque, which is where the mixed media paste comes in. So we still need to finish some coloring. I did the purple with Flirty Fuchsia. Then I added the little green stems for the pumpkins here, and those were in Lime Rickey and Grass Skirt. And last was all of the black. Now, you don't really need to do the black on the ghost faces because we're going to go back and cover those up, but we need to get our ink blending done on the rest of the piece before we go in with the mixed media paste. So I'm taking a very small brush and I'm using black soot. And the reason I'm using black soot is because I really like blending this, and I like that it's kind of a soft black instead of being really, really dark. I just think it gives the panel a little softer look, and we're going to also be giving it a soft look by adding some fun paste. So the type of paste I'm going to use gives a lot of texture and it's kind of a matte white. It's called Altenew Embossing Paste, and this is a really fun paste. You can add colors to it, you can do all kinds of things, but I just want it to be opaque on the white parts of my stencil. So I'm going to use a little bit on the candy corns. I'm going to use the rest on these wonderful ghosts, and we're going to have this nice soft white fluffy paste. Now, you may wonder, how in the world are we going to get our little ghost faces on with this paste? Well, just wait and see. I've got a tip or trick for that for you too, because the ghosts definitely look cuter with their little eyes. So we'll get this taken care of and then we'll put those faces on the ghost. Okay, my ghost faces took some trial and error. Here's one thing that didn't work. I tried using Nuvo drops and just filling in the spots on the stencil, but that was ended up being quite difficult. It does look good, but it's a little bit tedious because you're trying not to push that Nuvo drop through and underneath the stencil. So I end up scrapping this and thought maybe I can just ink blend over this paste. Well, since this is kind of a matte paste with some texture, it's not like a plasticky paste, it worked perfect like that. So I just went through and blended over the paste with the Distress Oxide Black Soot, and it worked great. Okay, and let me show you up close how much texture and how good this looks. Doesn't that look adorable? So that is using all of the stencils and using some paste. Now let me just show you what it looks like not using that background stencil if you just want to cut out some die cut pieces. So if you're going to be die cutting your pieces, say you're making a Halloween wreath or just a Halloween scene and you need these same pieces, it's a lot easier not to use the bottom stencil. So I didn't use that spider web stencil. I just stenciled all the same images. And instead of using paste, I use a light gray on the little ghosts to give them some nice looks. And I'm going to cut these pieces out to use on other cards. You can see that you get most of the pieces cut out, which is awesome. And so as we're about to move on to our third piece, I had to show you that you can take vellum and create some nice texture with this spiderweb embossing folder. I did this behind my sentiment and I thought it just gave it the cutest look. So I embossed this piece and then let me show you how it looks on the card. Look at how this looks. I'll set it back on the regular mat too so you can see it, but it gives a little bit of texture and just so much excitement to this card. I know that it's hard to see here on camera, but watch when I set it aside again. You'll see how much detail this piece of paper has on it. Look at that. Isn't that so cute? That's just the background of the Too Cute to Spook. I did put something on it to hold it straight because vellum does want to bend. Okay, look at how cute this turned out. It's so adorable. Now, to do this on craft paper, we are going to have to take a little different approach. So let me show you how we set it up. I am going to use a different type of ink because the oxide inks show up better on craft paper than the other inks that I was using. So I am going to start with that first stencil and I'm going to go ahead and lay down some colors. We're going to have to do a little different process with this one. We're going to start with the Distress Oxides, get the color laid down on the paper, and then we're going to have to do some other things to make our images show up better. Okay, here is the secret sauce. You have got to do something to create more light so that your other colors will show up, or you're just going to have kind of a muddy mess since it's already on brown. So what we're going to do is we're going to use white pigment ink. White pigment ink is hard to use. I'm going to show you how to do it. Do you see I'm using a paper pouncer? You can use an ink blending brush to do this, but it's more like paint than it is ink blending. So just get it on the stencil. So you'll see that I'm just pouncing this through and I'm trying to get a good coat. You will still see through your white ink a little bit, but it's going to brighten up your images. So I'm going to finish putting white with this paper pouncer on all the levels of the stencil, and then we'll go back in and we're going to add ink. The other thing about white pigment ink ink is that it's a mess, so make sure you clean up your stencils. And two, you've got to let it dry. If you don't let this white dry, you're going to smear everything around and mess it up. So once I've got all of these images done in white, I'm going to set this panel aside for at least an hour, or I'm going to run some heat over it to make sure that that white ink is as dry as possible. Now look at how this is looking. You can see that this is going to create this like glowing effect of our images. It's really going to bring them out on this craft colored paper. As this is layered, you have to do each layer of the stencil to make sure you've got all of this in. And here's what it looks like with all the layers done. It kind of looks cool like this, I'll say, before I even add any color. Now, once you have your white background down and it's dry, you can go in and start ink blending. I'm using spiced marmalade on all of my pumpkins and parts of the candy corns. So there's not as much creating that shadow or that like glowing effect with your ink blending when you're doing it this way. You could try that. I just thought that the glowing from the white really makes these stand out. So I basically just covered everything with the appropriate color. So I went in with black soot and did all the pumpkin faces, the witch hat. Now I'm going in with villainous potion and I'm doing the purple areas. And last, there are a few green areas. I'm going to use Rustic Wilderness. And you see, I keep this Post-it note kind of close in case that I need to use it as masking. So if there's an area that I might accidentally get the green into the purple area or something like that, I can take that little Post-it note and cover it up. So once I get this done, we'll be done with this panel. And I'm going to show you how to put together the rest of this card. And we'll talk about all of these things that we've learned today. Okay, here's this panel. This is definitely a different look than our first card. Using that craft paper just gives it kind of it gives it a more crafty, different kind of look to the card. So I thought that the perfect accent to that was just a dark sentiment from Happy Owlloween. I'm going to use the word Hey Boo. I'm going to use one of the bats that we made earlier, and I'm going to use some different thread. I feel like with this more crafty type look, it looks good to have some twine or something like that around the card as well. I'll show you some final looks at this card, but today we learned about the different layers of the stencil. You don't have to use all of them, how using the dies can give you these cute little things to add, like the bat on this one, and how you can stencil more easily on darker colored cardstock like this craft paper to create a completely different look. These cards look so different and they're so cute. So just a great way to stretch all those stencil supplies, especially when you have that die cut. It gives you so many options. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. I had so much fun being with you. Make sure that you hit the like and subscribe button. All the things that I used in this video will be linked in the description. So go down there, check them out, and I hope to see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye.